Hi everyone, I'm Laura Warnod, and this is the WonderWorkers podcast. WonderWorkers is an interview-based podcast where I invite changemakers to talk about their experience, their mission, and drive towards impacting the world, and ultimately to inspire, educate, and empower entrepreneurs, business leaders, and owners, and young people on how they can build together a more sustainable world. This community of WonderWorkers act behind the scenes to lead the world towards a new era of purpose, self-actualization, and innovation. This is a generation who shows no limits to what they can accomplish, no tolerance for dehumanization, and use their uniqueness as a real power to change the world. We want to invite you, responsible leaders, entrepreneurs, young people, and all other listeners in your quest for purpose to give you too the power to change the world. But having powers alone does not make us superheroes. Even them need allies. It's only when we accept our differences, combine our powers, belong and thrive together that our forces can turn into superpowers. We are WonderWorkers, a community of changemakers, entrepreneurs, business owners, and aspiring ones who use their superpowers collectively to change the world. So tell me, what are your superpowers? I met Louisa through my network as she used to work for the same company I did. I got in touch with her and had the chance to join an event she and her co-founder Olajide facilitated. The event was absolutely amazing. I was so blown away by the warmth and authenticity of speakers participating to the event. And on top of that, the event was about the relationship between mental health and diversity, equity, equality, and inclusion. And, well, being a creative bridge builder, I love when different topics come together, because that makes the conversation and insight so interesting. From the moment I thought about potential guests for my podcast, Louisa and Olajide were on top of my list because they have such a genuine way of opening the conversation about mental health and diversity and equity and inclusion. I really can't wait for you to listen to our very vulnerable conversation about our experiences working in DEI and the mental health space, and how this is coming to life in organizations and in the world, and our hopes for the future. So yeah, I'm glad I had them on WonderWorkers. But before we start, let me tell you a little bit more about the guests I'm talking to. Let's start with Olajide. Olajide is the co-founder of SISU and the Equality, Inclusion and Wellbeing Partner at Turtle Bay Restaurants. Olajide has been working in the hospitality sector for almost 15 years, taking on a huge number of roles from sales, marketing, customer service to recruitment. He's been named the top 20 influencers in the hospitality industry by Modern Hospitality. He has spent a fair amount of his career discovering fantastic people and matching them with great careers within great brands, all by having a chat and connecting. Understanding people's values, personal aspirations, and career goals was a big part of his life, which has taught him so much about communication and the importance of having the right technology to ensure as a business you can deliver the best candidate and employee experience to your people. Olajide is now an equality, equity, and inclusion disruptor driving change. He believes that companies must represent the world they serve, especially now that businesses are shaping the world we live in, and wants inclusion to be a right, not a privilege for a select few, not to be tolerated as being different, but accepted and celebrated for being different. His aim is to get people thinking from different perspectives, connecting those that may otherwise remain disconnected. Now, Louisa is, well, the other co-founder of SISU. She has spent the majority of her career within the luxury fashion sector, which she is forever grateful for. But after experiencing and witnessing the dark and toxic side of fashion culture, she was eager to create something bigger and more beneficial to others. She made her footprint by championing and contributing to many well-being strategies and initiatives, building charity partnerships and liaising with various board members to voice the opinions of the employees through employee engagement. It was at this time she realized how many people she could potentially help, and that's when she planned her transition into the equality and inclusion world. She is a true believer in the power of people and diverse teams. This is what brings out the best of an organization, ensuring they reach their highest performance and potential. Her belief is that learning and development resources should be base offerings within companies, and she's an advocate for coaching and mentoring. For all those reasons, they both built SISU, the Equality, Equity, Inclusion and Wellbeing Consultancy. It was created to work closely and intricately with businesses, charities, and other groups to achieve thriving, healthy organizations and communities. Passion is at the heart of everything they do. Integrity runs through their DNA, and courage is the backbone of who they are. Well, I had the chance to witness their work by going to an event that they organized last year, and well, they are both very inspiring people, creating meaningful connections between inspiring people in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And well, I had the privilege of talking to them today, and it was absolutely amazing. So yeah, let's jump in. Hi, Louisa. Hi, Olajide.
Hello. Hiya, how are you?
Good, I'm good. I'm a bit tired, I must say, from the Christmas holidays, which is not really holidays anymore.
It doesn't feel like holidays anymore.
I know, yeah.
I think it does depend on what you do and how you do it, because some people you speak to and they're like, best Christmas, had such nice relaxing time, spend it with the family, very wholesome. And then other people are like, yeah, it was what it was. It is what it is.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, I do feel like it depends on what you do.
I just always feel stressed, like, after it.
We need to find a new Christmas tradition. That's what we need to do. We need to find a new thing that makes us not stressed and relaxed in a nice environment. I think Scotland.
Oh, that's a good, like a nice place
like a castle in Scotland full of snow.
Bougie.
By the fireplace.
Yeah, that's
reading
what I
a
want.
book with a glass of wine.
Basically the holiday.
With a chef.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And a nice spa. Right,
2023 Christmas goals. We've got it.
I've already started planning it, babes.
Good. And how are you feeling, both of you guys?
Do you know what? I'll be totally honest with you, Laura. I have been feeling somewhat apprehensive about the month ahead, just because I think we've had the whole Christmas period and it's been a bit of a lull, and as I mentioned before, I wasn't feeling very well, and then this January we've got quite a busy January coming up, haven't we? And so I've been feeling a little bit apprehensive about it, but at the same time excited. Then that always kind of mixes in the butterflies in the tummy, and I'm like, is this excitement, is it anxiety? I'm not really sure which one it is, and I kind of flip between the two, but that is my natural Gemini personality.
Yeah, and I feel like I mean I totally understand what you're saying, because I always feel like that as well, and I never know whether it's anxiety or excitement. Sometimes it's very hard to
differentiate between the two.
Exactly.
I think you just got to tell yourself you're excited, haven't you? And then you're like, I've got this.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Olajide?
How do I feel? How am I? Do you know what? I'm excited. I think last year was a really interesting year for us as a business, as people, as a society. And, a lot of things happened last year, especially post-COVID. It was like last year was like the first proper year out of that, wasn't it? So now this year, I feel excited to see how the year's going to unfold. I know this year is going to be super special for us. I can feel it in my bones. Even on New Year's Day, I remember sitting there with my partner and I just had this overwhelming emotion of oh my God, this year's going to be it. This is going to be and I even now saying I feel I can feel it.
That's excitement.
I can feel
right?
it in my chest. It feels weird. I feel like I'm going to cry. But I can feel like it's going to be the one. So I just feel super excited, and I'm kind of don't want to wish it all away, but I do want to wish it I want to see to the end. I want to I want to get to December and be like, wow, we did it. Yeah. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
Also nervous.
A bit of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's you're super excited, but at the same time you don't want to jinx it, but then you also want to appreciate that kind of excitement as well. So it's how do you find balance between the two? But it's so great. Well, we'll talk about your plans for SISU in 2023, but before we start, I'd love to hear from you your story and who you are right from the beginning.
Good. Okay.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, okay. Ladies first. So I started off in fashion. I left school when I was 18. Didn't go into further education. I wanted to get out and work and earn some money. Although at that time I didn't realise that fashion was probably not going to earn me so much money. Started off just like running, like Devil Wears Prada. I was working for a supplier and I was like constantly running samples all around London. Moved on to like reception, and then I went into the design room and I was a design assistant and I designed trims and things like that, and then I worked in production. I was like the fashion industry whore, basically. I've done every job you can imagine, and then I ended up in luxury fashion and working in computer aided design, where I did photography and retouching, and I worked a lot with employee engagement and some of HR on like wellbeing strategies. And it was there that I just kind of like found what I feel like was my purpose. I love fashion, and it's always been like, you know, creativity's always been really important to me from school. Like I did art and graphics, but it was the interaction with people and just like they're just, you know, people are so interesting. Everyone has a different story. Everyone has a different challenge or trauma or happiness. And, you know, people are just like this massive curiosity, basically. And that is what really sort of gets me going, because I want to be able to connect people with other people and help people and inspire people. So it's really, I'm very people-centric. I think if you're getting that vibe, I hope you are.
Yeah. Yes, we are.
So when I got to work with like employee engagement and be part of like these sort of groups, workforce advisory council, that sort of thing, I kind of realised this is where I need to be. Like I kind of need to drop out the whole fashion side of things and just actually focus on people. Yeah, that's kind of my backstory. I'm not going to go into SISU yet. I'm gonna let Olajide tell his backstory before we sort of go into how
before we bring it together.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm Olajide, born in London. I guess my journey is a bit different to Louisa's because I finished school, went to college, did hospitality. I wanted to be a chef. I wanted to go to France and to study Le Cordon Bleu. But my parents, being Nigerian, they were like, you cannot be a chef, you're black. Wow. You'll see that my parents come up quite a lot in these stories. But yeah, they were like, you can't be a chef because you're black. You need to go to university and we're not going to pay for you to go to France. So I went to university and studied events management, basically went to uni to study how to put on parties.
I think 95% of people.
Yeah, and I'm really good at putting on a party.
Say you smashed it.
I'm really good at putting a party on. I've always worked, so throughout before uni, at college and at uni, I've always worked in hospitality. My first job was in hospitality at TGI Fridays, and I remember walking into TGI Fridays on my work experience and feeling at home. I felt like I found my people, and I've never felt like I always felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb, or I always felt like I wasn't part of like a group. And working in hospitality in the restaurant made me feel like I was part of something because everyone was so different. It's such a diverse industry to work in, is hospitality, and I found my home. I found my people. There was, you know, and I loved it. So I worked in hospitality throughout university. I worked my way up to like management level. When I graduated university with my degree, I was an assistant manager of a restaurant in Leeds, and I wanted to stay in hospitality. Like I was like, this is for me. This is what I want to do. I've always wanted to stay, like work in restaurants. I've always had a dream of owning my own restaurant. So I stayed in hospitality, worked in restaurants for probably like another 3 or 4 years until I realised that I was putting on too much weight. I was drinking loads. I was having I wasn't having a social life. I wasn't seeing my friends, and I didn't like what I saw in the mirror. So I decided to make a change. I was headhunted and went into recruitment, and I worked in recruitment for over 10 years, which sounds so weird.
I don't know how you did it.
It sounds so weird saying that I worked somewhere for over 10 years, like in an industry, because Well, today's my birthday and I'm 35, and I'm just like, the years are starting to like really add up. I'm doing
when you start counting in 10 years, like in decades.
When you're like going, I did a decade.
Yeah.
A decade.
It's not how old he was.
Yeah.
We had a little business away trip recently,
Yeah.
and in the car, wasn't it? And,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh, your 35th birthday." He was like, "What? What?" I thought I was turning 34.
Yeah, it's like you start to realise that, like, your life is really like going by quite quickly. Anyway, back to the story. So I worked in hospitality, but I did moved into recruitment, worked in recruitment, but I wanted to stay hospitality. So I did hospitality recruitment, I did temp recruitment, I did perm recruitment, and then moved internal, and I worked for a company called Wetherspoons. You may have heard of them. And I worked up the ladder in Wetherspoons and became, a senior recruiter, and I was leading the team there and recruiting for 950 pubs and hotels around the country, which is, it's like wild to even think like that I even did it, because at one point I was doing it on my own. I didn't actually have a team because everyone left. But during the process, of working there, I realised during the move from working in a restaurant environment to working in an office environment that there was actually a lack of diversity in certain elements. And what I mean by that is there was, I guess, less about diversity and more about representation. So in the restaurants, there's representation from all different walks of life. And when you go and work in an office environment, you really started to not see that representation so much. And I always believe that you cannot be what you don't see. And I didn't see anyone like me in the office. And I got told so many times working in office to dim my light, to not be so loud, to change the way I spoke, to not speak out in meetings. And I basically didn't feel included in things. I didn't feel like I belonged. And then I left Wetherspoons after doing some amazing projects there, worked on an amazing diversity project there where I, had budget to do some wild things I'd never been able to do anywhere else. So I learned a lot. And then I moved to another hospitality brand called GBK, again, where I learned so much. And I was able to implement their D&I strategy there as well, which was, again, it started to get me into this space of wanting to do more around diversity and inclusion. And I guess that's where me and Louisa then had our conversation, and where, I guess it wasn't even SISU at the time. We had
it was just a conversation, and then it.
Well, no, we had a rebrand before we launched. We actually didn't call it SISU, did we?
We're weirdos, okay? We are weirdos. We had a conversation in the pub. We went to the pub in Farringdon, The Fence. Love The Fence. Shout out to The Fence. And we were talking. I had basically finished work, and I'd had an incident happen at work. Am I going to talk about the incident? Yeah. And I had an incident happen at work where I was head of recruitment. I have my own P&L, my own budget. I'm allowed to do whatever I want with the money as long as it comes into budget. I paid for someone to take some photos and a video for something. And the gentleman's name was an African name, similar to his surname is similar to mine, but not the same as my surname. And the finance director called me into a room and said, "I think you've committed fraud." And I was like, "Sorry." He was like, "You've paid your brother. This person must be your brother, or like related to you, and you can't pay your own family from your own money." And I was like, "What? Where have you come with that conclusion from?" And he's like, "I can tell from the names." And I was at this point in my career, I think I have seen racism. I've seen racism. I've been part of I've been part of that conversation, so I know what it looks like. But I still was shell shocked. I was literally standing in this office thinking, I don't even know what to say to you, because this is something that you can't predict. This is going to come into you. It's going to happen. Anyway, I walked out of there, was really upset, and I remember going to the CEO at the time and saying, "This is what's happened. I want to make a formal complaint." He then gaslit me and said, "Oh, I think he's probably just joking. You know what he's like. He's probably don't take it seriously." Blah blah blah. Completely brushed it to one side, and then I met you in the pub. And I was like,
vented.
I literally vented over several bottles of red wine, and you were venting about something else as well that happened at work, and we both were just sitting there, just like seething.
Enough is enough.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, just feeling like, how can people be expected to go to work, be treated like this, and then go home and then come back into work the next day and just pretend like everything's okay? Like, it's not fair. I think I felt like I had potential. I had seen it so many times in so many different ways, and I've seen so many people being torn down and left feeling like nothing and felt like they didn't belong, and they become shells of themselves. And I was like, that's not right. You can't go into work and leave feeling like you're a shell of yourself. And that's actually similar to how you were at one point when you were working.
Yeah, massively. Yeah. For me, it was after I had Maisie, my daughter, I felt like I didn't have a place in the fashion industry because I had a commitment at home. It was almost like I just got branded a single mum all the time that wasn't able to commit to big projects, or I was never considered to be that person with no like evidence of that whatsoever, because I used to get up in the morning at like 5 a.m. I don't drive. I would get the train to the next sort of place, drop my daughter to nursery for like 7 in the morning, get on the train, commute to London, get back, pick her up at 6:30, then get another train home. And I did that every day for a good couple of years before I was like, I've had enough of this shit. Because people just didn't take me seriously. Like, I wasn't promoted when I should have been promoted. I wasn't considered for big projects when I should have been. Like, I was the lead in my department, and I wasn't getting the exposure and the support that I should have had. And that was definitely something that I moaned about a lot. I mean, I say moaned, I feel like rightly so. But yeah, I think that was one of the things that we were talking about that day, that evening when we'd finished work, and I was like, I've just had enough of not being valued for like my skill set when I'm actually really, really fucking good at my job. And
not being seen. Like, you were like not being seen. Like, you were literally being completely overshone because
being
you
seen the wrong way.
Yeah, because you have a child, because you're single, because you've got commitments. It just was ridiculous.
Yeah.
It was absolutely. So we both sat there just like, what can we do to change this?
Yeah.
What do we do? And we were literally sitting there gulping our wine, and we went, why don't we set up a consultancy and help businesses do this? And I remember I turned around to you and I went, I feel like the market's extremely saturated.
Well, it's not really saturated, because I think when you start that kind of business where your goal is really to change things and have an impact on people and on the way things are, then it's never going to be saturated, because even if you impact one person, this person is going to impact another one with, you know, your work and your experience.
Yeah, and I think you're so right. I think that's one of the things that we said, was that if it was saturated, then we wouldn't be feeling this at work, because the problem would have been solved. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And there's clearly 100%. That people are doing it, but there's not enough people doing it. And if there is, they're not doing it right. So how do we do it and do it right and make sure that we do it differently? And that was one of the things that we said, was like, because I remember saying to you, this wasn't still at the pub, by the way, but we had left the pub at this point. We'd said enough at the pub, and we were like, we need to go and do a business plan and come back together. And we did, and we remember we sat there and I was like, we need a USP. Yeah. Like, we need to know what's going to set us aside from everyone else. And the USP was really easy, because I had actually worked with different consultants already throughout my career, D&I consultants throughout my career, who'd come into my business and like the business I was working at and helped with our D&I strategy. And I said to Lou that they've all come at it from a HR point of view. They've all come at it from this is how you protect your business. This is the policies. This is the procedures. This is the law. We didn't have people first at the heart of it. It didn't lead with people. It didn't lead with empathy. It didn't lead with love. And I was like, what we need to do is do it where it's not about protecting the business. It's about actually protecting the people. And it's about...
Which is easy for us, because that is what we were coming from, the angle we were coming from anyway. There was no one there protecting us when we needed protecting in big businesses.
That was an easy
conclusion for us.
Absolutely easy. And then the other thing, USP for us, was that it was us. Like, the other thing that I'd seen from other consultants is that they don't have the lived experiences. Like, we actually have lived experiences. We use our lived experiences. We're well networked as well. We have friends that have also similar experiences who share their experiences with us. We listen intently to other people's stories so that we can use those stories within our training. So that is what sets us apart from other people. And I was like, that's what our USP needs to be. Our USP is us.
We just basically be ourselves.
Yeah, which is weird considering we've been working places where we weren't able to be ourselves.
But that's the way you learned that actually that was wrong and that there was something to change, right? And I think it's interesting what you said about that, some people are doing it, but they're doing it the wrong way. Is that what you mean when, you talk about people coming at you from a policy regulation perspective and not from a people perspective? Is that how you describe it? Or it's not about just saying what's wrong, but it's also about understanding, because there's so many, I think, people, being in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. And as you said, we don't necessarily always see the impact that this is having. So I think it would be interesting to know, like, what you think about that, like in terms of some people doing it maybe not in the right way, and what's the right way, and what people can actually do to change things.
I think for me, one of the things that I had noticed was, I think people always want to, obviously DEI work, it started off with businesses wanting to make sure they do the right thing, but it got lost in translation, because them doing the right thing was them making sure that they didn't put a foot wrong, and them making sure that they had the right policies in place so that no one could take them to the court and they don't lose out on money. And over the years, that's just been the way that things have done within the DEI space. And I think, and that's why it always sits in HR, because it's always seen as a HR thing. And I think from our point of view, whenever we do this work, we always like to say that it's not a HR thing. It's not just a HR thing. It's a HR. It's a training thing. It's a whole business thing. It's a movement that a whole business needs to come on board with, rather than it being a HR thing. And I think that was how we always. That's how I think we see this as a change maker. The only way to make change is for everyone to come on the journey with us, rather than it being solely down to one department.
Also, in terms of like us saying that, there's other consultancies out there that are doing it wrong. Like, there's no sort of wrong or right way, but there is maybe more ethical ways. And I think, like, for us, it's never been about tick boxing and making money, whereas I think a lot of consultancies that we've been in relations with, you can kind of tell that there is a sort of standard process, and this is about the money at the end of it, and then we'll leave you to your own devices, and there's no connection or partnership made. Whereas for us, there's been times where we've turned brands down to work with them because we don't see the
intention behind it, the real ethical intention.
Exactly, the morally, right thing. Like, there's no real reason for them to be doing it other than looking good and doing the right work. So there's been times where we've been like, do you know what, you're not for us, sorry, because we might come and do a workshop with you, and then what are you going to do after that? And that, how are you going to leave your people, and how will your people feel after that? And if you don't have those goals in mind already, then for us, you're not really on the journey. You're just tick boxing and a bit of lip service, and we're just not about that.
It's so interesting that you think that, because I worked for a couple of companies as well, and so I was looking after like the diversity, equity, and inclusion transformation program, the well-being program for employees and stuff, and I actually felt like completely the same way, because I was the only one looking after the whole transformation for the whole 350 plus people department. And like you said, sometimes it's just about the money, but sometimes they don't even put the money, like they don't even invest a penny into actually transforming. If you talk about transformation and long-term transformation and investing in your people, then you need to invest the resources and the
absolutely.
And that's exactly that. It was all about like tick boxing and just
it's performative, isn't it? That's
exactly.
the problem with and that's something that I've been really conscious of when we do the work that we do. And one of the things that we always talk to our clients about is that we're not here to just come in and solve one problem or to be a bandage over a situation. We want to come and actually be like embedded into your business and a really like long-term partnership, rather than it being a single solution. And I think a lot of people now are starting to realise that you can't just do one training course or one workshop and then fix diversity and inclusion. It has to be an ongoing piece of work, and it has to be something
commitment.
That you have to actually embed it into your everyday. You have to embed it into your processes, into the way you're thinking, into business decisions and stuff like that. And I think the problem with it, again, going back to what I originally said, the problem with it being a HR thing is that you completely forget about embedding it into your everyday, into processes. You focus mainly on just policies, and that's not enough.
Yeah, exactly. And even from an employee perspective, if it comes from HR, sometimes, the vision you're going to have is, it's another HR thing.
Yeah.
When if it's actually coming from the leadership team or, even the company across department and stuff, then, it's a serious thing and a serious transformation that needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what's important as well, is that, that it does come from leadership and above, because that's when your employees will buy into the fact that you are making a transformation and that you are serious and committed to this journey of culture change.
And so going back to your story, so you both had your experiences independently, and actually it might be good for listeners to know how you met and kind of how you came up to create now SISU, right?
Yeah, we didn't meet in the pub.
We have known each other since we were teenagers. So one of my school friends left school and went to college and met Olajide at college. I stayed at school and did A-levels, but she was kind of like the bridge between us and college friends, and so we used to go out together and just do stuff that you do when you're teenagers.
Yeah, we used to go out all the time. We used to go away on wacky weekends.
Wacky weekends, honestly.
Rave parties.
Older than 35 now. Wacky weekends, what the hell?
Wacky weekends. That's a new word for me now that I'm 35.
Wacky weekends. Yeah, and we used to go on holidays together. We used to go to Ibiza.
We say used to, but we still do that.
We still do that, obviously. But this is how we grew our relationship. We just bonded, and it wasn't always roses with you and I, was it?
No.
We had a bit of a personality clash for some time. It was kind of love-hate. So we loved each other, but we used to argue like cat and dog. Yeah,
because we're both very fiery characters.
Yeah.
And so when especially when we drink, it used to just be like a whirlwind. People just didn't want to go out with us sometimes.
Because they knew the night was going to be wild.
They did. Yeah, they did. We've had some altercations, we'll call them. And but yeah, I think as we've grown older and wiser, we've definitely found that it's okay to have those fiery moments, but deep down behind all there's still just a lot of love there. And I think it's love, but also appreciation for who we are as individuals. We're both very in tune, I think, with our emotions, and
100%.
And so that really helps actually as a business, for us as a business, because we're very emotional people.
I think that's probably why we've grown to become like that, because we had this mad upbringing of one another.
Yeah, and I also think I
we raised each other.
We did. I think when we were younger, we both had a lot of, I call it trauma. We had a lot of trauma, and so the trauma led to anger. It led to frustrations with the world, with society.
Yeah.
And as we grew older, we were able to identify those things and talk about them, and then we realised that we had so much more in common than just
than what we even realised.
And that drew us together, and that's what's helping us as a business to continue driving, because we always refer back to those I guess those traumas and those learnings that I talk to Lou about things all the time, whether it's even if it's not about work, even about personal stuff with me and my partner, and she does the same, and
literally everything,
and we're just we're best friends basically.
Yeah.
She's my sister.
Yeah.
It's so good to see that, and I think even for people to know that to build a business, actually it's really important to, if you want to be two people, if you want to build a business with, I don't know, your best friend or your sister or
don't
brother,
do it
because you're gonna end up killing each other.
It's so hard because when we first sort of said to our other friends that we're doing this business together, they were kind of like, what? How are you gonna manage that?
They were literally don't think it's a good idea, and we both were like, we're adults, we can do this, we got this. And I think my advice to people, if they are setting up your business with your friend, I think it's about honesty,
first and foremost. You have to be so transparent with one another, because there's days like, you know, you're just in a really bad mood, or, you know, you've got like other commitments going on, and it's such a big commitment to start up your own business. You have to wear every single hat going that you can imagine within a company, and you're managing a lot, you're managing each other, you know, you're managing your personal life. So being honest and transparent with one another about how you're feeling and your opinions on certain things, and, you know, where you want to take the company and what your goals are, like, you have to have that down, and you have to have those conversations as well to make sure that you are actually on the same page all of the time, and keep revisiting those conversations.
And I also think like one of the things that we've learned, and I think is really important when you set up a business, especially with a friend, is identifying your strengths. Because I think when we first started, we were both really honest, and we were like, "This is what I can do. This is what I can bring to the table," and you were like, "This is what I bring." And then it's been really clear, like, who's good at what, rather than both of us trying to do everything. It's actually, you know, giving each other the work that suits each, like the person, if that makes sense. And I think as well, it's like, you always, I think if I get angry about something or frustrated, I will take a second and go, I sometimes have to split business to friend.
Yeah.
Like, you have to go, Louisa's my friend. That's never going to change. Yeah. Louisa, the CEO, my business partner, I'm going to have a serious word, because do you know what I mean? And you have to sometimes split that and be like, okay, we're going to have this serious conversation. And what's really funny about us two, this is ridiculous, by the way. This is absolutely ridiculous.
I love it.
We have a WhatsApp group. We're just the two of us for work.
Right.
And then we have our normal WhatsApp, which is just that conversation. Because in the WhatsApp group for work, we've managed to separate it, because we can have
so smart,
we can have conversations about work, and we can go in about work, and then we go in at work, and you leave it and you close it, and you go in and have a conversation about normal life.
And sometimes those two groups are actually running at the same time.
Yeah.
So we'll be like, oh, hey babes, like, what are you doing this weekend? What are your plans? And then at the same time, like, oh, by the way, you need to email such and such, and we've got to speak to the accountant. And these two conversations are running parallel.
But that's such a good tip, because you're actually dissociating the friend.
Yeah.
And exactly. That's boundaries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, and I think when we first did it, we were both like, it's a bit stupid. We didn't actually do it for that reason. We just thought it was cool.
We were being funny.
Well, that's smart too.
And now that we've done it, it makes so much sense. And like, there's been moments where you're like, I'm not going to be able to do messages before 7:00 or 7 a.m. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I start early, and she'll pick up things when she wakes up, and it works really well. And as we grow as a business and as we grow as people, we're creating new boundaries. And
that was one of the hoo-ha moments, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He kept messaging me at 7 a.m, and I was like, I'm doing the school run. Can you stop messaging me at this time? And he's like, yeah, but I start work at like 8, so I have to say what's on my mind before. And I was like, right, okay, yeah, I don't actually have to reply when you send the message. And that was like a note to myself. I had to be like, okay, this is fine.
Yeah.
It's okay that he does that, because I was getting so stressed, wasn't I?
Yeah. And it's
just that conversation.
It's just about having those honest conversations, and sometimes we both have to shake each other and be like, you need to grow up.
Yeah. Calm down.
Get
it together.
Yeah, because you both have to manage your relationship, but also, I guess, you need a lot of self-awareness about, because I think building a business also is very different from, working in a company. And I mean, I feel it from my perspective as well, and I'm by myself, but every day I'm learning more about, who I am and how I like to work, and like putting boundaries with myself as well. So it's even more, I guess, difficult when you're two people to manage both the relationship and also your own boundaries, right?
Yeah. And it's like, you are learning so much about yourself and each other at the same time. It's like your work ethic and how you like to work. It's like when you work for somebody else, you're going into work every day, you're like 9 till 5:30 or whatever, and you have to be in the office for these hours, and this is what you're doing, and you've got somebody project managing for you sometimes and telling you what to do and what needs to be done when. Like, you don't have any of that when you're setting up by yourself, as you now know. I think actually it's probably easier to have a business partner to have somebody to like kind of pick you up on the days where you're feeling not so motivated, or like remind you of something if you've forgotten, or you know, at least we have each other to bounce off, and you know, we've created this new way of working for ourselves. But when you're by yourself, like I can imagine that, you know, you have to have all the self-motivation. Yeah. You're the only person that's like, you know, pushing you and patting you on the back. Yeah. So
yeah, very different.
Kudos to you.
I always say this to Lou. You know, I'm like, I don't think I could do this on my own. Don't think I could do it, because it's just every day we're having to wear, like you said, different hats and do different things and motivate each other. And also when you're having conversations with people, like sometimes even when I do meetings on my own without Lou, I'm like, oh, I just wish Lou was here because I just need someone to bounce off. Or like, it's just nice to have someone to be there, to have your back and like support you. And sometimes when you're having those difficult conversations as well, it's nice to have someone in your corner as well with you to have those difficult conversations. So I mean we're very lucky, because I know a few people that have started businesses up with their friends and it just hasn't worked out, because and then their friendship has ended as well. Like, and I think that we're so far so good. Touch wood, but I think you know, we've managed to do really well for 2.5 years, and you know, I think we'll be fine.
And look, you know, there's been times where we've both had those moments where we're like, oh my gosh, I just want to throw the towel in, like I can't do this anymore, like, and those moments it's so crucial to have somebody else, you know, next to you by your side saying, no, like, this is why we're doing this. Remind you why we're doing this, you know, look at how far we've come, and be grateful and stick at it. And, you know, I think if you haven't got that person, it's much harder to get through those days where you're like, I just can't be bothered anymore. Like, this is too much. But yeah, we've always got each other to pick one another up. So yeah, blessed and grateful.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I mean, yeah, as you said, like from even a mental health perspective, and especially in your field of work, I feel like, you know, with everything that we see in the world from, you know, a human rights perspective, or like, you know, from stories in the workplace of other injustice or discrimination and so on. I'd love to hear more about your experience with that and how you manage your mental health too, because you know, sometimes I feel like in my work too, I'm so motivated to do things, and I'm like, okay, like we need to make a change. There are stuff to do and stuff, but then you take one step forward and it's like, you know, something happens and then you're like, oh my God, the world is actually going backward. And so, yeah, I'm wondering.
I'm laughing because I literally have those conversations all the time where I'm like, everyone's a dickhead. Hate you all.
Yeah, and, you know, we're doing this work in the background and, you know, we're trying to move things forward and make, you know, really impactful change. And, and then you see what's happening in the world and you're like, just, you know,
what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think it goes back to what you said right at the beginning, which is if you can help one person, then our job's done. And I think that's like, sometimes I have moments where I have those thoughts where I'm like sitting there and I'm watching things on the news, and I try not to watch the news anymore because it's too much. Or I hear stories, or like we're doing a training workshop and I hear someone's story and I'm like, I feel so sad that you've had to experience that, and it makes me really sad. And I go, as long as I'm able to help one person, you know, I can't think about every other person's story and all the other stuff that's going on in the world, because I've got no control of that. The things I have got control of is the things I'm going to focus on. But I think when it comes to like mental health and well-being, it's something that, you know, in terms of my own and our own like well-being, it's something that we, you know, I'd say that because we're friends, it really helps, because we're able to vent to each other so often. I mean, I went into Lou last night. I texted Lou last night. I was in the bathroom. I probably shouldn't share this, but I'm an oversharer. I was in the bathroom and I was like, Lou, I hate everyone. I'm so angry. I'm anxious, and I'm in the bathroom doing breathing exercises. What do I do? It's like those moments where I know that I can text Lou and she'll text back with advice. Or if I really wanted to, I could have picked up the phone and called her, or I could have walked up to the top of the road and had a conversation with her, because she lives not far from me.
We don't live far
Really.
apart. No. We're basically in each other's pockets.
You can knock at each other's door and be like, I need help.
Basically.
Yeah.
It's nice that we have that, because we're able to lean on each other for certain situations. And the other thing that I'd say as well is that, because I do a lot of work with a company at the moment that we're working closely with, and I'm working with them like mostly every day, and I'm hearing a lot of stuff and I'm taking on a lot of baggage, and I started to feel like I was losing myself in the work, and like I was starting to lose the passion and the drive, because I was taking on too much of other people's experiences, and it was making me feel sad. So I had to go and get a therapist, because I needed to speak and talk about it, but with someone that wasn't associated with it all and won't have an opinion on it, because I just needed to vent, and so that's been really useful for me personally, is having someone to talk to and have a therapist, because sometimes it just gets a bit like you just want someone to say, you want to talk to someone and be like, I'm angry at the world. I don't know why I'm angry at the world.
It's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, and then they unpack that for you, and there's no judgment, and there's no like, you know, and do you know what I mean? It's nice to have, and I felt like that's really, really useful for me.
100%, I agree. And I think with a therapist as well, they're like, they don't have the need to fix.
Yeah.
You know, like when you talk to your friends and stuff, like you
Yes.
have this like need to give a solution and fix something, and sometimes that's not actually
That's not helpful. No.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's not the most helpful solution. So sometimes it is just better to have somebody who, like you said, is not associated and not going to have an opinion, and not be like, oh well, you know, if you just do this, then this will be better, and then you can, you know, or like giving too many solutions. Sometimes you just want somebody to listen and just vent off.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I think also helps as well with our work is that we don't take ourselves too seriously.
No.
Like, this work is serious. Don't get me wrong, it is serious, but there's no need to make it serious. There's no need to take it too seriously. You can have a laugh with it, and I think that's one of the things that comes out when we do our training, or when we do our talks, and when we do any work, is that we always bring our personality to it, because it makes it much more enjoyable to do, and we have so many laughs when we do this work, and like even when we're doing like things that should be probably quite like serious, like you know, putting together a workshop, we will be laughing and giggling about it, and I think that helps as well, because it just takes the edge off. It really does, and for us, like we're never going to change that. That's our therapy in itself. And I love that. That really helps,
and it's part of your values as well, of like being authentic, right?
Oh,
It's
definitely.
about being yourself, as you said at the beginning. It's about just bring yourself to work and just be yourself, and
and that makes people feel comfortable. People feel at ease, and they feel more willing to share and engage. And like, don't get us wrong, like we've had many workshops where, you know, the emotion has gone more negative, and people feel, you know, the emotion pulled out of them, and they get upset and they get sad, and they you know, they cry, and then we cry as well. Like we cry with the people that we're running the workshops with. Like there is a whole array of emotions, but ultimately we are there to make people feel better and to feel seen and heard, and part of that is just having a bit of a josh about.
Definitely. And I think as well, like the thing that the first year, I would say that we didn't reward ourselves for the work that we were doing. So we were doing the work, and we were just doing the work. We were driving and driving and driving, and so I think our mental health in the first year of having the business was probably like low. It was bad. Our well-being was bad, and then obviously we were in COVID as well. So
on top of that,
on top of that, so you know, it was a tough year. But then I think like the second year we started to we were like.
We were learning about our worth, and you know, and also like how to run a business as well, and value it. We didn't reward ourselves. We were taking on a lot of new information in order to build ourselves out, and also like, you know, a lot of big events happened in that first year with George Floyd. We were doing a lot of anti-racist courses, workshops for people. So we were hearing so much more of people's lived experiences within this field, and racism. And Olajide has obviously experienced that firsthand. I haven't experienced that directly. Hearing those stories of other people, I've heard Olajide's many times, and they do cut. But hearing how extensive racism is for people, even just, you know, on a day-to-day, it is huge. And that was a huge eye-opener for me. And yeah, like, not like, oh, woe is me, a lot to take on, but it was just a very big sort of slap in the face and a shock to understand that actually this is a big deal, and now we've got a lot of work to do, and we're about to bite a big chunk off here and start chewing hard.
Well, the work you're doing is hard.
Yeah, it is hard.
It is hard.
But that's why it's so important to reward. Like, that's why it's so important to reward yourself.
Yeah.
To take some time out, like we did an away day, and like a couple of months ago, and like we went to a spa, and it was just like nice to relax. Although we did work, it was nice to it was nice to relax as well and just have a laugh. And like I think for us, it's like it's important to make sure that we get those booked in, and we're taking the time to reward ourselves and enjoy the fruits of our labour. My mum would always say, enjoy the fruits of your labour. And I think that's really important. That helps your mental health and your well-being, and it also pushes you to want to continue doing the work.
Yeah, and I think it would be interesting to know as well, because I mean, I met you at like the talk, like conference that you did over the summer with Let's Talk, and I found that, you know, it was so interesting that you took the perspective of talking about diversity, equity and inclusion with mental health. And I think, you know, well, I've seen that in companies that sometimes they separate the two when actually it is incredibly related, right? Yeah. So it would be interesting to know, and I mean for listeners to know, how do you make that happen in organization? And, you know, if you could talk about the intersection of both and why it's so important, because I think sometimes people don't necessarily see why the two are connected.
I think, I mean, in the simplest form, if you are excluded or discriminated against day in, day out, how is that going to affect how you feel about yourself and the thoughts that you're having? Obviously, they're going to be negative because you are experiencing something that is negative. And for me, that's the simplest form of explaining how diversity, inclusion, equity is connected to people's well-being. Because if you don't feel like you belong, if you don't feel like you're part of a group or a community or a workforce or whatever it may be, a family, your friendship circle, whatever it is, if you don't feel like you're a part of it and you're included in it, and you're not being seen, and you're not being heard, you're not being treated the way that you deserve to be treated, that is individual to you, specific to your needs, then ultimately you are going to end up feeling like shit, and you're going to be talking to yourself in a negative way, and you know that is going to have an effect on your health and the way that you see the world as well.
I think, you know, from experience, I would say that diversity, inclusion and equity, whichever words you want to use, if it's DEI, EEI, whatever, whichever way, I think it makes sense for your DEI strategy to sit with your wellbeing strategy, for it to be interchangeable and locked together. And, you know, one of the clients we work with, you know, we built their strategy with their DEI strategy, with their wellbeing strategy, and it works so well because, you know, for instance, we work with a client called Turtle Bay, they're a restaurant brand, and as part of their wellbeing strategy, we have got them to appoint wellbeing champions within their business. So each of their restaurants has a wellbeing champion. And those wellbeing champions are people that have volunteered to do the role. They've gone through mental health first aid. They've gone through a wellbeing training. They've had one-on-one counselling sessions. They've had group therapy sessions as well. But they are also champions of the equality and inclusion work because they understand the why the work needs to be done. So they not only work within your business as wellbeing champions, but they also work with as equality and inclusion champions. The synergy of us doing the work around equality and diversity and educating the teams on how to be inclusive has led to them wanting to make sure that they look after their own well-being as well. So it all just works so well together, and I don't know how else to explain it. It just needs to sit together. Yeah. And I think if you build a strategy where you build it together, you'll start to see that the champions or the E&I champions or whatever you have internally, they start to gel and synergy together. I don't know how else to describe it. I'm not describing it very well. But
no, that makes sense. I mean, it needs to come from the people inside the company and kind of almost create advocacy from everyone in the company.
One thing I will say though is, because a lot of the time it is internal and it is about your networking champions or whatever you want to call them. These people are volunteering because this work is important to them.
Also because they've gone through something themselves.
I was just about to say, they've experienced trauma in some way, shape or form that is relevant to these fields. Even though they've volunteered to do the work, it doesn't mean that you can take the piss out of them. And you have to, as a company, an organisation, you have to reward these people and you have to take care of them because they are taking care of your business for you willingly without any extra, pay or rewards always. Like, even if it is just an acknowledgement and a conversation with the group and the individuals on the work that they've done. If you're senior leadership, then you need to be engaged with what these people are doing. 100%.
I just remember the thing that I was trying to say. The thing that I was trying to say was that when you start to do the work together, you start to find that if you have your ears to the ground around well-being, you'll start to see that some of the topics that come out of the things that your teams are not feeling comfortable around, or they might say that their well-being is not right because they haven't got a work-life balance, and then you start to see that it feeds into the fact that might come from a single parent who's not, they're not being seen as a single parent and they're being treated like everyone else, and so there's no equity there for that person, and then you go, actually then we need to figure out a better way for us to work and the process for that person to make sure that they feel like they can belong in here in this business. So you start to see that it feeds into each other. That's what I was trying to say.
Drop the mic.
These are amazing ways to actually start building your strategies, having these kinds of groups, because this is where the honest conversations start happening.
And I think it's interesting because I think for this kind of work it's obviously a bottom-up approach, but we need top-down too, right? We need, like as we said, the whole business to actually advocate for that and make things happen. And I think that, the way I was trying to approach it with clients today is taking it from a growth mindset perspective too, because I feel like, sometimes even, with clients or with family, I'm trying to be an advocate for that and kind of challenge them into what they're saying or like their behaviors. But then those people take that approach with a fixed mindset, and so they start turning the conversation back to them, being like, I'm a product of my time, we used to say that and it used to be okay, or it doesn't seem right to talk about white supremacy, or I've heard women saying as well, I was brought up in a culture that wasn't inclusive and I still made it. And I'm like, but isn't it because you fell into the trap of the patriarchal system and you just like...
Why do people feel the need to glorify toxic culture?
Exactly, but because they don't realize, either they're scared or they were so blinded by the system that they don't see the problem, right? And so each time I'm wondering, how can we ever have systems that can change our culture of belonging and representation and inclusion and equity if we don't have people of power? And because those people who usually have, those thoughts are people of authority, right? So how do we do that when people of power, authority, and privilege within organizations do not take that work from a growth mindset perspective? I'm wondering, how do we tackle that? Because I guess sometimes when I look at it, I'm like, oh, I'm going to work with people who are mindful about those challenges and really want to make stuff happen. But then also sometimes to have like real impactful change, you need to work with people who, you know, have the power, right?
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. Absolutely. I think, unfortunately, those people who have the fixed mindset need a hell of a lot of work doing, and that work has to come from them. There's not much that, you know, we can do other than keep sharing our stories, keep getting other people to share stories and connect, and, you know, for people of that group, it's such a tricky one. For us, it's about the long-term commitment to changing leadership, and that is like for us starting at youth. That is an avenue that we are taking ourselves into with schools and working with the educational system and making sure that we work with young children who are going to be shaping our future and will be those leaders in years to come. But for what we're facing now,
I think the thing is that there's going to be people that are fixed mindset and there's people that are going to be growth mindset. And the people with the fixed mindset, you can leave them for now. Put a pause on them because, like Lou said, they need to figure it out themselves when they're ready to. But there are so many leaders and I would say even from those from an older generation who, you know, typically will say that, you know, we grew up with this toxic, you know, behaviour and toxic culture, who are now seeing that that's just not okay and they want to change their business. And, you know, we've worked with some incredible leaders from, you know, from various companies who I would say are from that generation who are like, I know that the way we used to do things isn't right, and I know that we need to change. And so those are the people you want to go and work with, because those people will actually inspire the other people that have the fixed mindset to change eventually, because they'll see that they'll get left behind. Because businesses are starting to change. Businesses are starting to understand that they cannot do the things that they used to do. They're having to adapt to the new way of working. Like look at the whole working from home thing. There's still companies out there that I see regularly who are like, I'm making all my stuff come into the office and we're office people, and it's like, that's not okay. You can't be, the fact that you're still shouting about 5 days in the office and not being flexible for your team is terrible. Like, it is terrible. And so those people are the ones with the fixed mindset, and the people with the growth mindset are the ones that are going, you know, let's have flexible working, let's have, you know, you can do 2 days at home or 3 days at home and 1 day in the office or whatever you feel comfortable with. And they're starting to change their business. And those people with the fixed term contract. Those with the fixed mindset will eventually have to catch up, because otherwise their business won't thrive anymore.
That's it. Yeah, those with the growth mindset, they are flourishing. They are expanding. You know, they've got loyal people. The organisations that are led by leaders with the fixed mindset, they're gonna either fold eventually, or they will just they'll just have no retention whatsoever, and they'll just be slogging their guts out to keep their company.
And we've started to see some of that. I would say we've started to see some of those fixed mindset people starting to, you know, jump ship and come to this growth mindset, like sort of ship. And because we've been speaking quite a few different events, and I've had people question and ask things, and people that from a fixed mindset ask, you know, some ridiculous questions, and you can tell that they're from that mindset, but they're starting to wanting to
question.
They're starting to peel away on the onion, starting to come apart, and they're like, oh, okay, maybe I need to ask more questions, maybe I need to learn about this. So I do think they'll come eventually. But like Louisa said, I think the thing is for us is that there's only so much you can do with I don't want to say the oldies, because that's ageist, but the fixed mindset and the older generation, I guess, you know, the focus has to be on the younger generation, because that's the future. And that's the thing for me, is like, the reason why we do this work is because we don't want people to have to go through what we've been through. And it's like, I look at my brother's not actually young anymore, but like, I look at my brothers and I think, you know, I don't want them to experience what we've been through. Like, even like Maisie, your daughter, I always think, you know, I would hate it if Maisie experienced the same things that you experienced. Like, I look at my parents, and I remember when we set SISU up, they were like, you can't change racism. Racism's been around for donkey's years and it's never going to change. And I'm like, the reasons why it's not changing is because you sat back and let it happen.
Yeah.
And that's what we're not doing now. So we're changing it. And like, so I don't want to sit back and like, if I ever get blessed with having children one day, I don't want to sit there to my kids and go, oh yeah, racism's still alive and it won't change.
Yeah.
Because that's just ridiculous.
That is a fixed mindset.
Yeah, it is. So I think, you know, the focus has to be on young people, has to be on getting into schools, getting into universities. You know, the dream is that this education around diversity, inclusion, equity needs to be a syllabus. It needs to be in the curriculum. It needs to be built into the education curriculum somewhere, because when we do
what we are working on.
When we do this training, in businesses, we go. I remember the thing we always say to people is, you know, we allow people to be in a brave space to open up about things and experiences and share their stories, because we are very aware that some people have no idea about anyone else's perspective.
Yeah.
People have lived in bubbles for years, and people have lived in these bubbles, discriminating, being misogynistic, being homophobic, and have gotten away with it because they didn't know any better. And now we're having to teach people new ways of communicating and new ways of leading with empathy and new ways of experiencing other people's perspectives. And so you have to give people that room to kind of say the wrong things but self-correct. But we need to get to a point where we don't need to be educating it anymore, because it's at this level in terms of being in a business, because it's already educated at school level. So by the time they get into business, there's no getting it wrong, because they know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think it's a good bridge to kind of start talking about SISU as well, and like all the work that you do. I mean, you work for businesses, obviously, and well, I didn't know you were working with schools too, so that's great. But can you talk a little bit more about, I guess, the mission and like the projects you worked on and the impact you had?
What's the mission, Louisa?
Or like,
I feel like the mission is just so like beauty pageant. We're just saying, we want to change the world.
No, but it is though. It's true.
That
though.
is what it is. Like,
we want world peace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's good to have like a big vision, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're just like putting one stone and being like just, you know, not dreaming about the future that you actually want to see, then nothing is really driving you, right?
I'd definitely say that we have some huge visions. Like we, you know, I will be honest and say that we have discussions about, you know, we're in discussions around doing a children's book. We're in discussions around doing a syllabus in school. You know, we're in discussions around obviously launching our podcast soon. And we want to have a TV show. There's so many things we want to do.
We've got like we're looking into creating like inclusive working spaces and building well-being into that, and there's
yoga studios and doing yoga. Louisa's just qualified as a yoga instructor.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
well done
for
kids. So she wants to do yoga for
that
kids.
in part of the
That's so
syllabus.
good.
So it's just there is so. I mean, we want to do more events. We've got like event coming up in the summer. We've got an away day.
How do you fit that in a lifetime?
There's so much going on. Like literally, Louisa came to my house yesterday and I went, we need to have a catch up, a proper catch up, proper catch up, where we actually talk about what we're doing, because I don't know what we're doing.
The thing is, though, we speak daily, and I feel like weekly we're like, oh my gosh, we need a proper catch up. Even though we speak daily,
every day,
we're like, I'm like, we need to have a meeting.
We've got meetings on meetings.
Overwhelming.
But our mission is definitely, I think for us, our mission is definitely, I mean, I think SISU needs to be like a household name where you go, SISU did you know that SISU do this? Did you know that SISU do that? And I want us to be able to change.
You glitched.
I want SISU to be able to change people's lives and be impactful for their careers positively. For their careers, because I think for us, the focus is always going to be on shaping the future for young people so that they get into work and they don't have to face any sort of discrimination, and they also feel a sense of belonging, and they also have their well-being looked after. And I think that's the mission, is that's always the goal. And everything we do is all about how are we changing, making an impact to make sure that that's the goal that we're aiming for.
But because, each individual learns differently, absorbs information differently, and has a different perspective, then we are trying to come at it from so many different angles, and that is why we have multiple projects on the go, which is sometimes a little bit overwhelming, but
Yeah, and I think the thing is as well, like when we if you look at our socials as well, like when we started it, we said, obviously, we need to make money. We need to pay our bills. We need to also have money to invest back into the business. Money is obviously important. It makes the world go round, unfortunately. But the reason why we do what we're doing is because we want to educate people. And education is key to what we do, which is why we do the A to Z on our socials, is why we share that information for free. Because, there's people out there that charge for that a lot of money, charge for like a glossary, which is crazy to think that people charge you for a glossary of words which you can get in the dictionary.
Or just online for free.
But we said that we wanted to do that because there's a need for people to learn about the words and what they mean and the impact they have and why they should and shouldn't be used. So we do that, and I think those are the sort of things that those nuggets like of wanting to share like free information is stuff that we'll continue to do. That's why the podcast that we're going to do is going to be about sharing experiences and learning and growing, because I think that's really important. People learn so much from listening to other people's stories, and for us, storytelling is so powerful, and we want to continue using the storytelling method throughout all the things that we do, which is why we want to do the events, which is why we want to do the book, which is why we do the podcast, and it all kind of works all hand in hand in telling a story and educating, because I tell you something, people just don't have their eyes open to so many things. Like I said before, people just live in a bubble. Like I had a conversation with a young lady earlier today, and she was like, I didn't know that there was racism until I was in a queue with a black person, and he was my friend, and he didn't get into the club, and he got searched. And I was like, ask the bouncer, why did I not get searched? And he was like, because you didn't have any, you don't look like someone that would have anything that was harmful for someone else or be carrying drugs. And she was like, so he looks like someone. And the bouncer said, yeah, because he's black. And that only happened a couple of years ago. That only happened a couple of years ago, and that was the first time they realised there was racism. And I'm like, that's people's eyes. Just unless you have experienced discrimination firsthand, or you have secondhand experience, you may not have never seen it. So some people just live in a bubble where they're like, I live a perfectly happy life. No one's ever bothered me. I've always got everything that I want. I'm privileged. Whatever. And so they just live in this. And actually, when you have conversations with them about it and you start to educate them and show them new perspective, their eyes get awakened. And that's what I want. I want to see more of those like awakening of people being like, oh my God, I'm not just in a trance, like just going about my life. I'm not a robot. I want to experience other people's cultures. I want to experience other people's experience and take it all on board. I'll stop now.
No, I mean, I found that crazy that, because for me, like today we have social media, we have the media in general. Like, how can you still live in a bubble, as you said, like on an island by yourself without any access to information and be almost like ignorant about the realities of...
It's easy to be ignorant than for you to have your eyes open, because as soon as you have your eyes open, you have to then do something with that, right?
Yeah, and you start questioning yourself and your own experience, and that becomes hard work.
That becomes work.
So it's become uncomfortable, don't they?
Yeah, so it's easy just to sit back and go, oh, didn't see it, didn't know it.
I'd like to end up on a positive note, though, and kind of from your own perspective and all the work that you're doing with SISU, can you tell us positive stuff that you've seen happening still, like whether it's in organizations?
None.
Or... Okay, done. But anything that kind of makes you hopeful about the future.
Do you know what? I think like this obviously there's lots of work to do, but I do feel like in the past couple of years, the work has really sort of catapulted forward, and people are starting to connect more with people that they perhaps might not have a few years back. I think people are becoming more curious, and I think that the more curious people are, the more hopeful sort of we become, because curiosity is what leads to research and, you know, further education and that growth mindset. Exactly. And, you know, connecting with people to learn what their stories are and what their journey has been. And that when you learn those stories and when you share stories and you know, alter your perspective on certain things, that does lead to a growth mindset. And I think that we are seeing a lot more of that over the past couple of years. And I don't know, maybe it's because we are working within this industry, I don't know, but you know, I certainly do see it and feel it a lot more around me. So I think that that is definitely a positive within this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think if we rewind 5 years ago, I don't think that we would have worked with this many people in such a short period of time. We've been worked with quite a few different clients in different industries, and I don't think it would have been as easy as it has been to get new business. And the other thing that I think
pre-COVID,
the other thing that I think was so, for me, like, was positive and made me feel so happy was our event. You know, our event that we did in the summer. Like, we literally took a stab in the dark. We did. We literally one day, probably over some wine, had said, let's do an event, and it was on the train.
I feel like that's a little bit of an old you know, bending the truth there.
Oh, maybe.
It was 100% Olajide was like, we're doing an event. And I was like,
oh yeah, yeah, that was it.
Spontaneity.
Right,
we were in Manchester. We were in Manchester. We met with So Let's Talk. We were sitting there talking about what we can do moving forward as a partnership. And it was at the end of our meeting, and I went, I feel like we should just do an event, you know? And they were like, that sounds like a really good idea. Let's explore that. And we got on the train home, and I wrote a brief.
No, but the next day, he sent out a brief.
Literally.
I had written a brief about what the event was, when it would be, how many people. I just had this thing, and I had this thing that I wanted us to do it, because I was like, I had the vision. The vision was there. It needed to happen. And the fact that we made it happen, and the fact that we were able to have over 100 people in a room to talk about equality, equity, inclusion, diversity, well-being, and people paid. There wasn't a lot of money, but they paid to come, and it means that the things are changing. Times are moving on. Like, my parents came to that event, and they said they couldn't believe that people were sitting in a room and had paid to be in a room to talk about that kind of work, because they just would never imagine that to have ever happened in their time. And I was just like, yeah, people are changing. People want there to be equity for people. People want people to feel included. So that for me was like a massive eye opener. And, you know, watch this space. Event number 2 coming your way soon.
Oh God, no, I'm crying.
I mean, you can be like very proud of yourself, because I mean, I attended this event and it was absolutely amazing. It's very genuine. I found that the conversations were so authentic and so genuine and so open. And, you know, sometimes you attend those events and it's very structured, it's not very, you know, organic. Everything is, but
it feels like people are reading out of a bloody textbook.
Exactly. When your event was actually very authentic, and you can feel really that people were connecting and having genuine conversations and just opening up about themselves. And
we were so blessed. We had some amazing speakers that have had some, you know, incredible
that was it, wasn't
journeys.
It was about getting the right speakers with the right audience, and mix that up with some food and some drink and some spoken word. It was just like such a magical afternoon, and I think we were just really lucky. And I think it was so, I mean, I obviously cried, but it was so moving to have that happen, and for it to happen so early on in our kind of like startup as a business, that was also like, because it was like that was actually our 2 years, wasn't it? It was literally 2 years.
It was our 2-year anniversary.
It was our 2-year anniversary, and it was just it was amazing, and I think, you know, that if that answers your question in terms of what positive things can you see happening, that was a huge positive. And I think, you know, this year I was going to say next year, we're in 2023 now. This year,
we have arrived.
This year we will, you know, gosh, don't know what's going to happen next, but we don't know how big the next one's going to be. Maybe we'll say 1,000 people. Who knows?
Well, I wish you that 100%.
Manifesting.
And exactly. And again, well done for everything that you've done and for the event. It was really great.
Thank you.
I wish you really all the best with SISU and all, you know, your goals and dreams.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love talking. I
mean, it's
cathartic.
It's not 100% done. I still have my 2 signature questions that I ask every guest. So, you know, as you know, the podcast is called WonderWorkers, and that's because I invite change makers, ordinary people doing extraordinary things for the planet and people. And so my last question is, what would you say is your superpower?
I would say my superpower is empathy. I feel like because of my previous like trauma and experiences in life, I am able to empathize with anyone. Like, you know, and I may not agree with everything that you say, but I'm able to empathize on that, something that you might feel might be quite difficult. And I think that's been really useful for us as a business and for me as a person in terms of growing. And I think being empathetic has also helped me with my own personal anger, because I had so much anger as a young person because I wasn't able to express myself in the right way. And now I feel like my superpower is that empathy and the ability to listen to other people, because I wasn't listened to when I was younger. So yeah, empathy, superpower.
I am going to say one of my superpowers, I've got many. One of my superpowers I'm going to say is, I don't know how to say it without, I'm going to call it connection, because I feel I've always had the ability to connect people to other people in order to benefit them, if that makes sense. Yeah. So it's like identifying a need in a person and then plucking somebody out of my network who can give you a solution to that need. That is one of my superpowers.
Creating meaningful connections. Yeah.
There you go. That's a nice way to say it.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay. Great. And last question. Who would you like to hear from next in this podcast?
Ooh. Do you know who would be amazing?
Harry.
That's what you were going to say? No?
Harry Corrin.
Is that what you're going to say? Yeah. Yeah, Harry. Oh, bless him. I spoke to him today. Yeah, Harry would be great. He is I would say he's a close friend. He's definitely a close friend.
Yeah.
But he was at the. No, he wasn't at the event, was he?
Wasn't there, no.
He did a video. He did a video at the event. And he owns a business called Corrin & Co. He and his company go out and do mental health first aid training. They do a suicide prevention training. And they are similar to what we do in terms of really embedding into a business well-being and a well-being strategy. And Harry is just like
he's such an incredible person.
Yeah.
Like his journey has been quite unique as well. And the way that he has used his past trauma and his experiences to benefit other people and to help other people is extraordinary.
Yeah, it really is. Wow. And he continues to amaze me with his skills, and he's a good connecting as well. He connects people as well, and I'm definitely a fangirl for Harry.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Louisa and Olajide, for being here and for this amazing conversation. I mean, I feel like it was just talking with friends, really, and talking about the important stuff. So yeah, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
No,
for
thank you for having
us.
us. We'll have to have you on our podcast next.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to see all the great work that you're going to be doing because it sounds really, really exciting.
Watch this space.
Watch this space.
Stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Follow the WonderWorkers podcast so that every 2 weeks you can get notified when a new episode is out. And I must say, if you don't, that's okay. But that would be a big miss because we have more inspiring and powerful guests to come. So let's meet up in 2 weeks for a new episode of WonderWorkers, a podcast that transports you into the world of our modern change catalysts and empowers you too to change the world. This podcast is created and hosted by me, Laura Warnod, founder of the Culture Cabinet. Thank you to Content is Queen for producing the podcast. But above all, thank you for listening. See you soon!